I want to look at 2 Timothy chapter 2. I want to look at verses 1 through 4. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. I sure wish I could find it on my iPad. I know I wrote it. But here, Paul is talking to young Timothy. And he's telling him, Paul is actually writing from prison. And he's trying to prepare Timothy. It's almost as if Paul is a veteran. Paul is a veteran who is seasoned, and he's been through conflicts in church and wars, spiritual wars. And he has seen people that were with him turn against him. People that were ride or die, leave him high and dry. But he was still encouraging Timothy because he recognized that the battle isn't given to the swift nor to the strong, but he that endures. I got anybody here know how to endure in the midst of doubt and trouble? If you don't, keep living, you'll learn, because there's trouble that is coming near your abiding place where you are. So he says to him in verse, after telling him all that he had spoken, he began to talk to him. He says, with all that in mind, though therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these things to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. I love this. It's as if Timothy is an enlisted man. And if you go into the military, the enlisted men and women, they're the ones that carry the weight. They're the ones that win the battle. They're the ones that go, they're the tip of the spear. The officers are important and the staff NCOs are important, but it's the enlisted man, that private, that PFC, that sergeant that's out front. And he says, I want you to be a good soldier. Today I want to talk a soldier in God's army. A soldier in God's army. It was so good to see so many stand up and say that they are veterans. Let's give them another round of applause. I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be here to serve with the veterans, because I know, as they said during the presentation, that many of us have had to miss some things because we were serving our country. I recall that when I was getting ready to go to Iraq, they wanted to follow me around and do a story on me. But I said no, because I had so many things to do, and I didn't want to share that last minute of time with them. I wanted to share it with my family, and it wasn't an easy thing. Every time we left, it was like pulling part of your heart out and setting it on the shelf, because your loved ones were going to be thousands of miles away from you. The Apostle Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's trying to tell Timothy, I want you to understand how to be a soldier in the Lord's army. And even as I talk with you, I know I have some veterans. I have some folks who've been in the storm a long time. I have some people, you've seen some people come and you've seen them go. You've gone through storms, and you've gone through setbacks, and you've found out how to lean and depend on the Lord. But Paul is not talking about a natural battle. He's talking about a spiritual battle. And he would tell us in Ephesians 6 and 12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. even as we're talking in the church, the battle is going on. There's something going on. Because the enemy, many times, he doesn't have to take away your talents or take away your ability. All he needs to do is distract you from the priority that God has called you to. And even as I'm trying to speak to you, the enemy will bring thoughts, things to distract you while I'm trying to give you the word of life. He is fighting an invisible enemy. We are fighting an invisible enemy that you can only see through the results of warfare in our lives. You don't see the enemy, but you see the results of the warfare. How do you see it, Pastor Campbell? You see it in lack. Lack? Every time they would sin, God would send a famine and they would have lack. You see it when bad habits that you thought you had overcome begin to overcome you. You see it when people who are overwhelmed with life, and sometimes you see that there's a war going on in addictions and depression and people departing from the faith. You see it when people can't seem to have peace. You need a pill to go to sleep, and you need a pill to get up, and you need a pill to keep you level during the day. You see it when homes are divided and husband and wife can't seem to get along. You see it in the church when there are divisions and wars and rumors of wars right in the church. Paul is talking to Timothy about a spiritual battle that will manifest itself in the natural. And we're told over in 2 Corinthians that the weapons of our, 2 Corinthians 10:4-6, he says the weapons of our warfare, they are not carnal, but they're mighty in God for the pulling down of strongholds. Now, and then look at verse number 5, because this is another area. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought, every imagination, everything that comes to your mind, he's saying that's coming to distract you. He says, bring it into the captivity of the obedience of Christ. Long before you do things with your hand, it must enter into your mind. You must say yes here before you manifest it there. So we recognize that we are soldiers in God's army. You know, I wish it was Marines. But the scripture says soldier. The Marines had not been formed yet. So we'll go with soldiers. I'm going to say it 3 more times. Soldiers, soldiers, soldiers. I got it now. Be quiet, Pops. You're going to get put out. He's a soldier. When I was a child, I remember, thinking of warfare. We used to be trained, young boys. Nowadays, you don't like to give a boy a rifle or a gun. But when I was a kid, that's it. You got the cap gun and the rifle and the caps. Y'all remember caps? I got some young folks in here looking at me like, caps? It's like little firecrackers on a piece of paper, and the handle hits it and it makes it smaller. How many of y'all know what caps are? Put your hand down. How many of y'all don't know what caps are? I know. They're blanks in a gun. There you go. But even then, we were being conditioned for war. And if we weren't playing cowboys and Indians, we would take the little green army men. Y'all remember them? They were about this big. They were plastic. And then you had to use your own imagination. You would take them and you put them in bushes, and you'd have to make the sound of the gun, and you make the sound of the rifle, and then you would knock them over when they got killed. And then you say, I shot that one. No, you didn't. You didn't shoot that one. You shot that one. No, I shot that one. We were being prepared for warfare. And today you are being prepared for spiritual warfare. Your children are being prepared for spiritual warfare. But nowadays, they got something different. They got the PS4, and they got Call of Duty. They have Halo. They have things that you don't have to use your imagination. They even have instruments you can put on your eyes, and you can be sitting there gyrating and feeling the impulse of what's going on. So we wonder, our kids are even more bombarded with sensations and thoughts and images that tell them that they are in war or that they have to fight, but they're being conditioned and desensitized by it. Actually, it's interesting. As I was looking at it, I even saw that it said parental advisory. Parental advisory. Could y'all find that YouTube clip? No? That's okay. If you can, show it. If you don't worry about it. Because I was shocked. I was looking at some of the games, and we don't even know how the enemy is attacking the minds of our children, desensitizing them. Because they sit there all day, and you can almost enter into the game, and you begin to shoot and kill people. It's just a small step to do it naturally when you've been bombarded with, and it seems like you're able to kill or be killed, and they're doing it all day, and they're being bombarded, desensitized, and before you know it, one day they get mad at somebody, and they go to school, and they think that it's going to be one of those bloodless kinds of things. And it'll be over in a few seconds. And before you know it, we have a crisis in our school. We have a shooting in our school. Same thing we were going through, just different. The battle changes, people of God. I need you to know that the enemy was fighting the same enemy that I was fighting at 9 years old. Here now that I'm 58 years old, we are still fighting the same enemy. Different technique, different tactic, different strategy. And I know you can see it when you see the video about fighting a real war, but there's a spiritual battle going on right up in here, and we're looking for the enemy to come one way, and he's coming another. And one of the biggest things he does, he gets you distracted. Some folks, I could hear it in my spirit. Some people talking about, what are they doing in church singing, God Bless America? If it weren't for the veterans on the battlefield, there would be no, look, it's the veterans that go that protect our right for religion too. There'd be no church. There's some place you can't have church. We are thankful that in this country we can. And every once in a while you ought to tell the Lord, thank you. Thank you that I live in the greatest country in the world. Amen. Yeah, we got problems, but this is the greatest. I'm convinced of it. I'm convinced of it. Paul is writing to him, and he's trying to tell young Timothy, he's trying to warn him about the perils of spiritual warfare that he has engaged himself in because he said yes to the Lord. I want you to know, because you said yes to the Lord, you need to be ready for spiritual warfare. And watch this. Paul is in prison, but he doesn't have a negative attitude, even though all his friends have left him. You know why they left him? Because every time they turned around, Paul was getting hijacked, shipwrecked. Paul was being imprisoned, and they're saying, man, you're supposed to be this dude. You're supposed to be this dude with all this power, and if your God allow all of that to happen to you, I can do bad. But what Paul had recognized, to live is Christ, to die is gain. Paul recognized no matter where he found himself, his God was there too. and that sometimes God will use you as a testimony to others. When you're going through and yet you keep your head up and you keep your eyes pointed toward the hills from which cometh your help, others are encouraged from seeing your encouragement. And when you come out, you can encourage them with the same encouragement that you receive from God. And Paul tells Timothy, he says, you're going to have to learn how to grow in the grace of Jesus Christ. And it's important that you know, if you're going to be in this battle, that some people are going to leave you, some people are going to join you, but he says, be strong in the grace. What does that mean? Sometimes you'll even have to go and help your enemy. Sometimes the very one that you were went and to perpetuate war with, you're going to have to turn around and help them. Let me say it like this. Sometimes you got friends that are going to be with you, and because you messed up, they're going to turn on you, and you're going to have to give them grace even though they turned on you. It's one thing, and it works both ways. Hold that up there. I need you to know that sometimes when you begin to grow in grace, when you receive grace, grace is God's unmerited favor. It's God's charisma to cause you to be able to do what you do. God says, I'm going to give you the charisma to be able to have people smile in your face and all the time trying to take your place, and you still got to pray for them. You still have to love them. You still have to forgive them. And not only do you have to forgive them, you have to learn how to forgive yourself. It's one thing when you do something and you didn't mean to do it, but it's another when you meant to do it, and people look at you and say, man, what is wrong with you? Why do you keep on doing that? And they will leave you because they're saying, listen, you've done that 3 times. I'm never going to give you another grace. Even though they depart from you, you have to learn to give yourself grace. Even though you intentionally messed up. He says, I want you to be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. He says, I need you to know that as you walk this journey, people who led you to Christ will sometimes be the one that try to lead you to this world. Come on, y'all. Anybody here but the person that invited them is gone? The person that, anybody knew somebody that invited them to the Lord, but they went back to the world? I couldn't believe it. The first person that invited me was my brother. And recently he said, I found another God. I'm like, huh? You have to know, Paul, this powerful man, I need you to know that if you're going to be in God's army, and you are, if you have said yes to him, I need you to know that the mountaintop experience is crowded with spectators, but the valley is lonely and despair and sometimes doubt. And it is in the valley that you have to encourage yourself. You have to give yourself just a little bit of grace, because if you meditate and think about all the people that was with you when you were on top and they're now nowhere to be found, you'll be so angry at them that you can't even see yourself. And you continue to see them here. You get lower and lower and lower. You have to learn to grow in grace. That means you got to be able to give it, you have to be able to receive it, and you have to be willing to let some things go. You have to be willing to cast your cares upon the Lord, for he cares for you. You have to be willing to shake the dust off your feet. You have to be willing sometimes to change your phone number. You have to be willing to not answer despair when it calls you again, not answer the call from depression anymore, not answer the call from addiction anymore. You have to say, greater is he that's in me than everything that's pulling on me. You have to grow in grace. And you have to do that by knowing, he's telling Timothy, he says, Timothy, I'm going to tell you this, but I want you to remember your training. Remember where you come from. God has already put inside of you everything you need in order to stand in your next storm. God has already put you, when he was making you, he already knew what you were going to go through. He said, all right, let me give him some endurance. Oh, a little bit more endurance. Well, and let me give him some long suffering. Better give him a little bit more long suffering. And let me give him a desire to know me even more. Because isn't it something, when you're going through the greatest storm, don't you get closer to him? Won't it make you pray? It'll make you holler. It'll make you call on him like you know him. You'll be like, God, if you there, I'm going to need you right now. God knew. He knew what you would need to handle the criticism. But you have to be able to grow. Because when people are criticizing you and you did what they're criticizing you of, you're going to have to be able to say, wait, yeah, I did that, but I'm going to take some grace on that one. Yeah, you called me a low down dirty, and I did a low down dirty, but I ain't low down and dirty. That's just what I did. It ain't who I am. That ain't going to stick to me. I'm not holding on to that. I rebuke that spirit in the name of Jesus. I reject that. I reject that name. No, sir, I don't answer to that anymore. He says you got to be able to grow in grace, and that means that sometimes, even though they hurt you, you're going to have to go and help them. I said, even though they hurt you, all right. Secondly, he says to him in verse number 3, he says, you're going to have to learn to discipline yourself. He says, endure hardness as a good soldier. He says, you're going to have to learn to discipline yourself. How does the military develop their men and women? The first thing they do, they send them to boot camp, and they begin to train them, and they get up in your face, and you're supposed to stand at attention, and they're so close you can smell their breath, and when they speak, the spittle is hitting your face, and they're saying you are going to learn to overcome your fears. You're going to learn to do some things you've never done before, but you can't quit. Just because you feel hurt, just because your burden is heavy, just because fear has come, you're going to have to learn to encourage yourself, discipline yourself, keep going when you want to quit. You're going to have to learn to say, greater, I know there's something on the inside of me that God is making a demand, and when I come out of this, I'm coming out as pure gold. I'm going to have to discipline myself. I may hop, but I will not stop. I may go down, but I'm going to get back up again. I need you to know that the enemy knows as close as you get to the finish line, it's going to get harder, but don't quit. God is trying to discipline you. He's trying to give you a word that will hold you in the midst of your circumstance. He said, the reason I had you hold your breath so long is because there's coming a time you're going to have to learn to hold your peace. Breath, speaking. You're going to have to shut your mouth and let me fight your battle. He says, I need you to understand, endure hardship as a good soldier. You know, sacrifice has become a curse word to the saints of God. Everybody wants, but don't nobody want to sacrifice for anything. We want. You call yourself bougie and you're broke. And you say, I'm bougie because I spend my money on whatever I like. I buy real good things. But the sign of a broke person is when you got things and you don't know that things have you. Materialism has you. You can't say no to nothing. You fell for the okie doke. You talking, I'm just bougie like that. I got to stay in a 5-star. When you got 1-star money, you better figure it out. He says you must discipline yourself. You have to, too many of us don't want to sacrifice. We want it, but we don't want to sacrifice. Yesterday we had our seniors in this financial wellness class, and I was very proud. Many of them had it together. Some of them didn't have it quite like they wanted, but I guarantee you they could look back over their life and say, you know what? This is where I went wrong, and that's where I went wrong. I got that too soon, and I didn't do enough with that. I didn't save enough. I didn't deny myself the temporary leisures and pleasures for the long time luxuries. We have to be willing to deny ourselves. It's a spiritual battle. And doesn't the enemy know how to send you what you like? I'm trying to tell you. He know how to send you what you like, and it'll be everything you can do. I walked in the kitchen, they got carrot cake. They're going to ask me, do I want some carrot cake? Lord knows I don't need no carrot cake. I said no, but I had it in my hand while I was saying it. I said no. It got bread pudding too. I don't need this. Y'all know how you do. You got it. You're doing it. I don't need this, but I'm going to go ahead. Discipline yourself. The enemy tries to entice you with things that you like so he can pull you from what you need. He entices you with things that you like so he can pull you from what you need. Sometimes we give too soon. You wonder why he won't put a ring on it, because he already. Sometimes we give too soon. He says, I want you to grow in the knowledge. I want you to grow in your skill. I want you to understand the spiritual warfare. I want you to know how the enemy comes after you. He doesn't come through with a red cape and horns and a pitchfork. No, he comes through as slim shady. He comes in, he's dressed to impress. She's fine as wine and just your kind. When they come in, you say, oh, there it is. Oop, there it is. No. We find out that you discipline. And you don't know that you're disciplined until you've been tempted. You can't tempt me with a cigarette. I hate cigarettes. You can't tempt me with boiled okra. Who would eat such a thing? No, you can't tempt me with that. No, whatever your temptation is, the enemy said, here it is. Here it is. I know how to get to you. He says, I need you to discipline yourself. I need you to discipline yourself. And some of us, we're going through and we don't recognize what God is doing. We don't recognize what God is doing. Sometimes we're going through and we think that we are not up to the task because we're not great warriors. We think that somehow I'm not hard enough for this battle. I'm not tough enough for this. But you need to know God doesn't give the hardest battles to his toughest soldiers. But he creates the toughest soldiers through life's hardest. Hold that. You think I'm not. God said, I put you in that so you could find out who you are. You went in it thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not disciplined enough. But when you get down in this thing and you start fighting for your life, something will come up out of you which God already put in you from the beginning of time. Thank you. It's something. When people go to war, most folks don't know how they will act when the bullet starts flying. I've seen folks that were here on the rank order of things, but as soon as they found out we were at the tip of the spear, we were already in Kuwait a week before the fighting started. We're already taking anti-nuclear types of medicine that I think that's why I lost my hair. I believe, it just hit me right there. I believe that's what happened. Some of that stuff I was taking. but you could see people who would go into harm's way, and some that we used to call the birds. And y'all don't know nothing about it. The bad guys in garrison. While you're going and doing operations, some guys and girls, they don't know how to press the uniform. They don't know how to. They're not very good physically and mentally. We would call them birds. I don't know how to fix it, but they were not good. I'm gonna go on. But I found some of those same guys that couldn't operate in garrison. Soon as we got to the field, these guys are running and gunning and jumping over, risking their life. And the guy and the girl that thought they were something, all of a sudden they thought more of themselves than they did anybody else. So they hiding when they should have been fighting. And I want you to know that God has a way of bringing out of you in the midst of the problem what he put in you. So don't defeat yourself. Oh my God, that time can't be up already. Y'all give me 10 minutes. I'm gonna give you back 2. Put it for 8 minutes. Be quiet, Anthony. So you need to discipline yourself. My next point is discipline others. But you can't discipline others if you're not disciplined yourself. But you have to first get disciplined and then discipline others. And you do that through discipling them. You have to then give them what you have. And whether you know it or not, whoever you're hanging out with, that's exactly what you're doing. You're giving them all of what you are. And you have to think about who you invest your time in. In verse number 2, he says to them, he says, the things that you've heard of me among many witnesses, he says, commit this to faithful men that they can teach others. Who are you discipling? Who are you mentoring? And you may say, well, I don't really have time for it. Well, let me ask you this. Who are you spending time with? Because that's who you're discipling. And that's who you're mentoring. And he says, take this understanding, take this knowledge, and share it with men and women that are going to be faithful over what they've learned. And he begins to talk about mastery. He says, if you're gonna win the race, you're gonna have to do it lawfully. He says you're going to have to understand the principles of how these things work. He says the husbandman, he says he must be the first partaker of the fruit. He says whatever he plants, he's going to have to consume. So whatever you give, you're going to receive. And he says, I need you to understand there is a law of reciprocity. He says whatever you have taken in, that's what you're going to give out. And when you give it out, that's what you're going to take in. He says, find men of character, women of standard. And he says, invest in them because iron still sharpens iron. And whatever you hang out with, that's what you become. So look at your friends right quick. You like what you see? I know you do. You got some great friends. My last point, don't fall in love with the world is what he says. He said, don't fall in love with the world. What do you mean fall in love with the world? Because isn't it something how we start out on this journey and after a while, you know how you give up certain things and it seems like the appetite for those certain things dissipate. But after about 6 months, 9 months, man, it seems to come back and it comes back even stronger. And then you start trying to play with it and you kind of dip into it and touch it and come back and you touch it again. Now you're holding it. Now you're hugging it. Now you're sleeping with it. Now you're talking to it. Now you're giving it all that you have. And you said, man, he said, don't fall in love with the world. And why does he do it? Because the Roman soldiers were so disciplined that they remained focused on their call to be a Roman soldier above everything else. So even when they went out into the world, they remained separate from it. They were a part of it, but yet they distinguished themselves separately from it. They carried themselves in a certain way. And so are we. We're supposed to be Christ-like. And God is looking for us to show forth his glory. He wants people to see us and then glorify his name. Because they've seen us, they've seen him. Some people will never, ever get to hear the voice of the Lord, will never, ever have a personal relationship with the Lord. But they'll watch yours. And they'll think from your relationship, this is what it's supposed to be like. Oh, but then they get messed up when you get messed up. And that's why you have to learn about growing in grace, because you're the one that brought them. You're the one that taught them. And when you fail, they didn't fail because they have kept their eyes on you. But Paul would tell them, follow me as I follow Christ. And that says something to us about how we even disciple others. If you disciple others with some self-righteous attitude about who you are, then you're giving that to them as an example. But if you know you're saved by grace through faith, it's not of your works, it's all of him and none of you, you can give them that and you begin to disciple them in that, and then they learn something about grace because you demonstrated through your communication and the way you walk with them. I always find that people that are really rude and crude, they have a form of godliness, but they deny the power. They make it about them. Oh, look what I've done and look what I can do. Man, you can't do anything unless God give you the power, unless he give you the gift. He says, don't fall in love with the world. Paul even suggested celibacy. Yeah, he did. Y'all got tight over in this area right here. I felt a little tightness all up in this area. I don't know. Yeah, Paul said it's better to be single than to be married. You have more time to spend with the Lord. It ain't for everybody. That gift passed me. I'm like, Lord, you know. And it may have passed you too, but you're going to have to be disciplined until you get in the right situation. And that only situation that God calls is marriage. I'm sorry if you want to. He wants us to understand that when we get enticed and pulled away from the world, don't the world know how to do it too? Don't it make it look good? You know, they know how to do it. And sometimes you feel like, man, I'm missing out. But I need you to understand that by you missing out, you are saving yourself from some things that you were getting ready to get into. Am I the only one that know that God saved me right before I was going to get a DUI? God, I'm the only one. I shouldn't say it. I'm sorry. That was BC, before Christ. That was before Christ. I can't be the only one. Whatever your thing was, you know what it was. One more, just one more. Fill in the blank. One more. You know you were going to go get another one, but God reached down and pulled you up and saved your life. And you still, if you think about it every once in a while, it'll pull you back. And he says, I don't want you to be entangled with this world, because it will show you something. The world always shows you its best up front. It's like it sells you. Y'all stand to your feet. I'm running out of time. It sells you a bill of goods. It says, I'll make you happy. If you do this, you'll never be alone. But I've come to find out you could be in a crowded room and still feel alone. Just because you're married. I know people that are married that are miserable. Just because you got money, that money don't make you happy. I've seen people with all kinds of money and they were miserable too. It's kind of like the enemy tries to offer you an imitation of the real thing. How are you going to have peace and you don't know the Prince of Peace? How are you going to have joy if you knew that the joy of the Lord is really your strength? You think happiness is what you are talking about, but that only deals with what's happening. And when whatever stops happening that make you feel happy, You're not going to feel happy anymore. You're going to be oppressed and depressed. You're in God's army. God wants to take you through training. Part of it is now. Ministers, please come. Part of your training is right now. He says, don't be conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by how? Renewing your mind. I've come here to give you the words of life.